There we are, and great thoughts about what Cinco de Mayo actually represents. Chris, you have covered the Diddy trial, I think, better than almost anyone has. Can't think of anybody who has done it better. Is this issue a fair trial, or is this going to be a referendum on the government and hip-hop and lots of other things?
I think it's the latter. Look, I mean, this questionnaire, to me, was really, really overproduction. All you need to say is, look, here's what's involved in the case. You probably know most of this. Can you be open to it, or have you already made up your mind? Yeah. And if someone says, look, I feel like I made up my mind. But they went in so hot and heavy to this guy's house. The defense has so much to work with in this about what was perceived versus what is realized through the show of evidence at this trial. This is going to be an interesting one to watch, and I think it's a referendum on the system.
Yeah, too bad it's not on camera. That would make it all the more interesting.
I know. I can't believe it. I think you should have a right as a defendant to insist on cameras.
Agreed. It's a great point. Really a great point. Chris, good to see you as always. We'll get to the trial here of Sean Diddy Combs in a few minutes. The big question there, he's accused of a lot of things, but he's charged with something very different. Why the government did that and why that means that Combs might be able to walk out of that courtroom a free man. First, though, politics. The 1970s are calling, and it appears over the weekend that they decided they wanted their talking points back. And it's interesting I picked the 1970s because nobody really talks about the 70s with nostalgia. It's either the 60s or the 80s. And almost everyone agrees the 80s were awesome. My fiance Rachel and I often comment to each other that we were misdecaded. There's misgendered, but there's misdecaded. Misdecaded is that you were born in the wrong decade. Rachel and I should have been coming of age in the 80s. We would have thrived then. But for some reason, Donald Trump wants us to go back to the 70s. Trump's message on toy dolls when he was talking about tariffs this weekend sounds an awful lot like former President Jimmy Carter in the 70s. We'll go back to then, when we were all supposed to wear sweaters.
A young lady, a 10-year-old girl, 9-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl doesn't need 37 dolls. She can be very happy with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
All of us must learn to waste less energy. Simply by keeping our thermostats, for instance, at 65 degrees in the daytime and 55 degrees at night, we could save half the current shortage of natural gas.
I didn't live through the 70s, but they sounded pretty awful. Nobody looks good in bell-bottoms. So it's curious why President Trump is talking like we're in the 70s again. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. Trump should know you do not win elections. You don't gain popularity with the American people by telling Americans that their kids are going to get fewer toys because everything's going to cost more. It may be true that things are going to cost more because of the tariffs. But rather than talking about the hardships, how about talking about all the wins that will result from tariffs? That's what he claims is going to happen. For example, the White House just released a pretty interesting fact sheet. It points to, from the Wall Street Journal, Trump's tariffs are lifting some U.S. manufacturers. They spoke with manufacturers in Chicago, Cleveland, and Ohio, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan. Then released a referenced Washington Post report that said the U.S. manufacturer doesn't mind Trump's tariffs at all. The story references Monson Ma-based Excel Dryer. The CEO there argues the tariffs are opening new markets for his company. Trump could talk all day about these things. Those are the anecdotes he should be sharing and highlighting. Instead, he's talking to the press about dolls and how Americans are going to be able to afford less dolls for their kids. In politics, there's something called an unforced error. You want to avoid those. This is the definition of an unforced error. Americans put Trump into office to lower prices, to expand opportunities. And fair enough, Trump firmly and believes that tariffs will eventually do that. But telling Americans they're going to have to do with less, that their kids won't get as many Christmas presents, or may not get Christmas presents at all, not a winning strategy. We begin tonight with Bill O'Reilly, host of the No Spin News on BillO'Reilly.com. Good to see you. Mr. O, I am trying to figure this one out. Strategy behind Jimmy Carter, be happy with less.
There is no strategy. Donald Trump is not a calculated speaker. He doesn't sit around with his advisors saying, what should I say? He says anything he wants to say. Rich guys say anything they want to say, okay? And since he fits into that category from the time he's been 7 years old, he said whatever he wants to say. There is a little bit of meaning behind the doll comment. He would like Americans to sacrifice a little to bring China to its economic needs. And I think that's what the comment was, but who the deuce knows? The worst thing was the Pope picture. That was beyond a pale.
Is he sort of flailing right now?
The doll comment is what?
Is he flailing? Is he kind of out of control? He seems not in... No?
I think he's tired, and that leads to statements that maybe you want to take back. But the doll comment, you know, you have to understand the president says all of these things, and it drives the press nuts. And guys like you seize on it, and he couldn't care less.
Don't give me guys like me, Bill.
No,
Come on.
It's true. It's true.
Oh, you just said the press seized on the Pope picture. You didn't like that either. Is that you think that was funny? Was that a joke?
I didn't say the press feeds on it. I said I didn't think it was smart because it offended a lot of elderly Catholics who voted for him. Look, there was all the headlines this weekend were about his interview with Kristen Welker, where she asked him, "Are you going to obey the Constitution?" And Trump said, "Well, you know, I don't know." What he was talking about, and again, he is not a precise speaker, was that my lawyers say X, and that X may prevail in the constitutional argument. But Donald Trump doesn't do that.
No, and that's why we didn't cover this, Bill. That's why we didn't cover the stupid scandal over did he actually say he would abide by the...
But the dolls fall into the same...
I disagree with you, and here's why.
The dolls fall into the same category.
No.
Okay.
Here's why. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 8 out of 10 people can't afford the home they're living in, the car they're driving, cash to cover the next emergency that pops up. If you hear that, as you said, a rich guy saying whatever he feels like, oh, well, you know, maybe you'll have fewer dolls. Maybe for a lot of Americans, that means they won't be able to afford Christmas presents. I don't think this is the same as some sort of made-up controversy over semantics on the Constitution.
I think that's about as far away from President Trump's intent as you could get. See, I mean, Dave Ramsey, 78%, that's not a true stat. That's a stat that Ramsey made up. I would say it's about 50% of Americans. If you look at the census and what people are earning and the median income, about 50% have no money and they're living time to time. But Trump wasn't trying to say, hey, your kids aren't going to get any Christmas presents. Come on, Leland, give me a break on that.
I'm saying that the American people who are hurting hear that and feel like he doesn't understand how they're living.
I'm all right. Look, if you want to be offended, you're going to be offended.
I'm not offended.
But that's about as far away from his meaning as possible.
Okay.
But the reason I raised the Pope picture is that was just dopey. There's no excuse for that. Yeah, I know it was funny and maybe but God, the guy just died. You know, all right. What else?
He was asked about it in the Oval Office. He said, "Hey, what? The press can't take a joke?"
Yeah, I mean, he thought it was funny. Some people do think it's funny, but he's a president. I would have advised against it had I been consulted, which I was not.
You were not. Something else you were not consulted on, because 60 Minutes doesn't really check with anything, is 60 Minutes over the weekend. I've stopped watching it. I used to love 60 Minutes, but I've given up because it's clear how what an agenda they have. You do watch it, as I understand, and they did a piece about the law firms that Donald Trump is going after, law firms that were mean to Trump. He's gone after. Here's Scott Pelley.
One firm told us the president's orders were, quote, diabolical, intended to bankrupt us. He said within hours, his major clients were threatening to drop his firm. It took only a matter of days before America's wealthiest and most powerful law firms buckled.
The idea of powerful law firms buckling and that offending Scott Pelley says a lot, but I think you think there's something more nefarious going on?
You know, this is so disappointing because I have a history with 60 Minutes. I've been on there twice. Mike Wallace is a good friend of mine. I knew Don Hewitt pretty well. They have a perfect right to do a story that says that President Trump is taking revenge on law firms that did things that Trump didn't like. That is a legitimate story all day long. What Pelley decided to do, and Pelley is putting himself up as the modern-day dragon slayer, the modern-day Edward Murrow going after Senator McCarthy. Pelley sees himself as going after Donald Trump. That's exactly what's happening. They put a guy up named Mark Elias who goes on 60 Minutes and spins this outrageously dishonest tale that he's being persecuted because he didn't buy the election fraud allegations. That's just a lie. Pelley's got to know it. Mark Elias ran Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. He hired Fusion GPS, the ones that got the phony Russian dossier that was discredited by the Mueller investigation. Pelley didn't mention it. Didn't mention that. Threw up this sleazy guy to say all of this outrageous stuff without even telling the audience who he was. No, and not only that, in the entire piece, Pelley uses 3 attorneys, all of whom slay Trump. Not one pro-Trump attorney.
Now, fine.
You tell me, is that good journalism,
No, it's not.
Leland?
But no, of course
Is
it's
it?
not.
No.
But
well, why the deuce are they doing it then?
Well, because they hate
why
Trump.
Why is CBS
well,
News
why is
allowing
it? Why? Because CBS hates Trump. Why does it upset you? It's obvious. It's been going on for 20 years.
Why would it upset me?
Yeah.
This is the premier news program in the country that, well, okay, but they still think they are practicing deceit.
I think I'm a lot of things.
That makes me angry. I've been in this business 50 years. This is wrong.
So why do you still watch it?
Because I wanted to watch that piece because they peel off. I didn't watch the rest of the program. Not that it was bad, but there was the basketball game on. Look, they have a pattern. Remember, Trump is suing them for $9 billion.
Right,
Paramount, CBS,
which is sort of
settle
absurd.
That suit.
Right, and they're trying to sell it. Look, we've known they've hated Republicans for a long time. They got caught phoning documents up about George W. Bush, right? Okay, this goes back an awful long time here. And your point's well made. I was on the email with you last night when we were talking about this. But you said in your note, and again, I'm not litigating this, meaning whether or not Trump going after the law firms is the right thing. But you are so animated and worked up over 60 Minutes, fine. What's more important? What's a bigger threat? Take off your journalist hat, put on your historian hat. What's a bigger threat to America? Some washed-up news program that's shown its bias over and over and over again, showing its bias, or the President of the United States using the power of the presidency to go after his enemies in a way that would make Richard Nixon blush?
The press has a responsibility to report that, okay? And then the American people can hear the facts and make up their minds about it. If it were me and a guy like Mark Elias hired a hit firm to destroy my family and myself, as Elias did, I'd go after him too, Leland, and so would you. So would you, okay? There's a line, all right? You try to destroy somebody's family, then all bets are off. 60 Minutes is a perfect right
is there
to
not
explore that story. But you can do it honestly, and they just refuse to do that.
Okay, fine, agreed. In the record, I'll ask you one last question. You talk about a line. Is there any lines about Donald Trump's behavior in terms of how he handles himself in the office that you say that's a line that you don't cross?
There are things that I've criticized the president for, and
Yep.
you know it,
Yep.
okay? But right now, the American people put him into office, and he's doing what he promised to do. He may fail, okay? And if he fails, we will report it honestly. But right now, I'm not seeing deceit on the part of President Trump. He sits there every day and answers every question.
That's true.
I saw a lot of deceit. I saw a lot of deceit in the Biden administration, going right up to
Yep.
whether he was capable of running the country.
So is deceit the only thing you
Do
can't
I see
do?
anything like that? I don't see anything like that right now in the Trump administration. But it should be scrutinized by the press. But
Okay.
do it honestly.
Agreed. I think, yeah. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with you. Certainly I'm not.
No,
It's
they
good.
are. Trust
Well,
me.
okay, they
I'll
are.
I'll get ripped up for this. I'll get ripped up for this interview. You wait and see.
Well, I'll be right there with you. We're getting ripped up. It's fun. Bill, it's
All
always
right.
good to see you. There we go. In this together. It's good to see you, sir, as always. Thank you. We first wrote a lot about this in War Notes. That's your chance for an inside look at the show every day. It is free. warnotes.com and subscribe. You will be delighted and smarter. You also impress your friends with all of your knowledge. warnotes.com for unflinching analysis. This election showed us America wants to move past identity politics. Cue the Met Ball. Live pictures as we look, where the elite of the elite and Democratic politicians celebrate black fashion. The latest let them eat cake moment and what it shows about Democrats' chances. Tonight is a who's who in left-leaning politics. All the celebrities, big money donors, the elite of the elite are gathering for the least inclusive, most sought-after event of the year. It's called the Met Gala. And ironically enough, this year's Met Gala in New York, live pictures of the red carpet right now, is all about diversity, at least in their words. The theme centers around the fashion of black males. And to be precise, we looked this up. They are celebrating, quote, super fine, tailoring black style. In other words, they didn't get the message that America is moving on from identity politics. Want to see who really didn't get the message? Kamala Harris is there. She avoided the red carpet, but former White House photographer Cameron Smith posted this on X. And here's the irony. At tonight's event, the conversation will center, in the cocktail parties and the dinners and everything else, on two things: how awful Donald Trump is and why they lost the popular vote to Donald J. Trump. Exhibit A. They're living it. With us now, Cenk Uygur, former founder of the host of the Young Turks. Founder and host of the Young Turks. It's been a long weekend, Cenk. Good to see you as always. Can Democrats win the working class if they keep thinking that this is real life?
Yeah. No, this is part of why we relaunched Rebellion PAC. So that's economic populist takeover of the Democratic Party. This is the two things that are not working. One is cultural wars, and the other is the establishment. So all these fancy rich folks going in incredibly, fancy and expensive clothes to a gathering like this, it plays really well in Democratic circles, and everybody goes, ooh, ah, right? But in the rest of the country, it doesn't play well at all. And I mean, I think I'm just lucky because I was born a populist. Like, I couldn't care less about fashion. I'd rather go bowling than go to the Met. And so, and that's the kind of guys we've got. We got Richard Ojeda in North Carolina and a lot more coming out that are real populists. We need to bring the Democratic Party back to the party of FDR and actually delivering for the average guy.
I feel like I should have started the segment by asking, who are you wearing?
This is a jacket from like 15 years ago, at least. The shirt's probably 10 years old.
Okay, well, hopefully it's gotten dry cleaned a few times. Hopefully it's gotten dry cleaned a few times between then. But you said that you got to give up identity politics. And I think this is an interesting point because we've said all along that the argument now is traditional versus progressive values. The argument now is not a divide based on race, as Democrats like to see it, but based on class. Can Democrats give up DEI and ESG and climate justice and all of these things that working class folks rejected?
Yeah. Now, let's be fair and let's call out both sides. Can the Republicans give up identity politics as well?
No, the culture war,
Right.
no, because politics is downstream of culture.
Yeah. And so I can't stand these culture wars. There's a woman in Minnesota that yelled at
By the way, forgive me
kid.
for interrupting you, but that is Kylie Jenner, in case anyone is interested. Please continue.
Okay. And so there's a woman in Minnesota who yelled at a 5-year-old black kid and called him the N-word. She's raised nearly $1 million online. Well, what are you giving to her for? Because she said the N-word?
despicable.
Don't do that. Don't do that, right? So everything's identity politics. I can't stand it. I have a crazy idea. How about equality? How about justice for all? And by the way, those are progressive positions, and the left should embrace that and love that.
You
right?
said equality, not equity. There's a difference.
Yeah, no. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Look, FDR didn't talk about equity. We talked about equality, and the Democratic Party and the entire country should be for equality. By the way, that also means equality for black folks and Latinos and everyone else, right? But this doing everything based on race, we've got to get past it. If we don't get past it, we'll never heal as a nation, and we'll never be divided enough. The Democrats,
look,
to me,
race
the
relations.
Met, though,
Yeah, look, race relations were getting so much better in America. Race relations were getting so much better. And then Barack Obama came in, and since then they've been getting worse. Stephen A. Smith on Cuomo earlier about that.
Black Americans have played the role of suckers to the Democratic Party. They've guilted us into voting for them, making us feel as if we're going to be ostracized, creating division within our own communities or what have you to get our vote.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but again, it goes both ways. Democrats have been browbeating voters for a long time. If you're a Latino man, you have to vote for Democrats. You don't have a choice. It turns out, well, they did have a choice, right? If you're a black woman, black man, you have to vote for Democrats. You don't. No, the way you win over those voters is by actually delivering for them. Higher wages, lower drug prices, things that they actually care about. On the other hand, the Republicans started identity politics with the Southern strategy. They said, why don't we go pick up the voters in the South that hated civil rights, and let's go do that. So you mentioned Obama. During Obama, the biggest ratings drop that he had was when he supported Henry Louis Gates, who was an African-American professor at Harvard, when the police stopped him from entering his own house. So that's Republican identity politics. Of course, they shouldn't have stopped him from entering his own house.
Yeah, and then there was the beer summit and everything else.
Criticizing that?
There was the beer summit and everything else. No, but I guess the flip side of that, if you want to keep going both sides, is Democrats have to learn to stop calling white Americans who don't want mass illegal immigration racists.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then I would say Republicans have to stop saying due process is no big deal. And when Donald Trump says,
but hold on, does one side really? Hold on.
It's no big deal.
This is an important point, and I'm going to give you the last word here. But you keep saying it goes both ways. The other side has to do this. Do they really? Doesn't only one side, in order to win an election, forget for a second making the country a better place. But in order to win an election, they really don't, right? It's only one side that has to do this better.
Yeah. So look, that's why I'm doing Rebellion PAC. That's why we're all doing it. Ro Khanna's joined, Richard Ojeta's joined. We've got a new candidate coming, and we're focusing on the things that American people actually care about: lower housing prices, lower drug prices, paid family leave so moms can get some time off. So we're being proactive, we're being productive and constructive. So if you say, "Hey, I'm a Democrat or Republican, and I want to play identity politics," no problem. Plant your flag over there, run in the primaries, and we'll meet you in the primaries.
Okay.
If you say, "Hey, I love the establishment, and I want to go to fancy Met Galas and wear $1 billion dresses," okay, go ahead, plant your flag over there. But we're planting our flag right in the middle of the Democratic Party. Economic populism. That's what Rebellion PAC's for. And I think we're going to take over the party. And I think we're going to have a huge part in selecting the 2028 candidate and actually bring back the Democratic Party to its working man roots. And I think it'll make all the difference.
All right. Cenk, thank you very much. We appreciate it as always. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, brother.
All right. Little breaking news into us at 9:30 on this Monday evening. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy will announce an overhaul of the nation's air traffic control system on Thursday. Part of the plan is to build a new air traffic control system, from new telecom to new radars to new infrastructure. It might take a little while, might cost a lot of money. That said, there's still some 1960s technology out there that needs to be replaced. Why is this so important? Duffy's getting out in front of this issue for a very important reason. Because air travel is like the weather. It affects everyone. Hence, MSNBC's massive focus today on delays at Newark Liberty International Airport due to air traffic controller shortages and equipment issues. Duffy wants to get out in front of this. He has to. Newark has always been an epic mess of an airport. But that doesn't matter. It won't matter to travelers when flights are delayed or canceled this summer. NBC News talked to a Newark air traffic controller who had some strong words about the safety of flying into Newark.
And one veteran controller tells NBC News, don't fly into Newark, avoid Newark at all costs.
Things need to change. It's not a safe situation for the flying public.
Okay, fine. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy warned that it would take years, if not a decade, simply to fix the air traffic controller shortage, much less this new thing that's coming out on Thursday with a completely new air traffic control system. Take a listen. We'll explain why he's saying it.
But on the controller front, if this works as planned, I'm hopeful, and Nick and I, with Chris, we're hoping in 3 to 4 years we can get to full staffing, not 20 years.
So here's the deal. Duffy knows there's a problem. He understands TV better than most people do. He understands the American public will get angry when there is delays, and if there is a crash or some other kind of accident, they will get furious. He's trying to get out in front of it and saying, look, we're already working on these problems. The American people don't deal well with airport and airline messes. A few years ago, JetBlue totally melted down. Hundreds of canceled flights. People were stranded everywhere. At the time, Bill O'Reilly got into a yelling match at the JetBlue counter. We reported on it, and we invited O'Reilly on the show to discuss. At the time, he blamed then Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg.
We already have the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. What is this guy, on a pogo stick? He's got to know that most of the flights on JetBlue are either canceled or delayed. Most of them. And they don't have enough pilots to run their schedule. He can fine the airline. He can go in. The feds can go in.
All right. O'Reilly had a point. Travel meltdowns don't work well for presidents. We Americans don't like to be inconvenienced. So keep an eye out this summer for Democrats and their friends in the media hammering Trump and Sean Duffy after every summer thunderstorm grounds flights at Newark. We can all agree Sean Diddy Combs' alleged behavior is, well, atrocious, reprehensible, but nobody is talking about why he might walk free. We will next. Live pictures of the New York City courthouse, where jury selection for the much-talked-about trial against media mogul, hip-hop artist Sean Diddy Combs began today. It's going to last throughout the week. Trying to find someone who hasn't heard about the case will be one of the many difficult tasks. Diddy's alleged behavior is appalling, reprehensible if true. Diddy reportedly held so-called freak-offs with sex acts that we cannot describe here on family-friendly television. But here's the thing. All those raunchy stories come from what he's been accused of in civil lawsuits. 81 people accused him of sexual assault. 17 say they were under 18. 64 said they believe Diddy forced them to consume things laced with alcohol and or drugs. 41 say they were at an event or party where they were assaulted. One of the lawsuits is sealed. 4 have been dismissed or settled. But here's the thing. He's only being charged with racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. None of the other things is he charged with in criminal court. If he's found guilty, he could very well spend the rest of his life in jail. But this trial on sex trafficking brings up a very critical question about what should be illegal, because the federal trafficking statute is beyond broad. With us now, Berger, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, where the case is being tried. Mark Eiglarsh, former federal prosecutor, criminal defense attorney. Nice to see both of you. Ladies first. Berit, start with you. We'll put the list up. He's been accused of all of these awful things. They're talking about the video of him beating his girlfriend is going to be entered in. He's accused of, but he's charged with these very seemingly specific crimes that have nothing to do with all the bad stuff. Why?
Well, I wouldn't classify it that way. I think actually what he's been charged with encompasses a lot of the bad stuff that you discussed. Okay. For example, the racketeering conspiracy, one of the beauties of the racketeering statute is that it allows prosecutors to bring in a whole pattern of small predicate acts. So, for example, if there's something that happened that may not on its own be a federal crime that federal prosecutors wouldn't be able to charge standing alone, or if there's something that happened that may be outside the statute of limitations, with this RICO statute, they can bring all of these individual acts in, charge them as part of this pattern conspiracy that was all done on behalf of the enterprise. So I actually think this RICO conspiracy is a really strong charge.
I think it's very strong. I guess, Mark, the point I'm trying to get at is this idea of trafficking, which essentially means, as I read it, and I'm not a lawyer, but it's a way to charge people with something that is a really horrible sounding crime without necessarily having proof of all of these bad acts, because all you got to prove is that you brought someone across state lines and paid them for sexual services, even if those sexual services may have been consensual.
You make a very valid point, and the jurors may feel the exact same way. When the typical person hears of that particular charge, they think of one thing, and this may not actually be that, which is why jury selection, which is going on right now, is so key. Prosecutors need to make sure that they vet these jurors to be able to say that they can set aside their bias and they can find him guilty if the facts meet the law.
Boy, I feel like I'm the only person here who's the defense attorney for Sean Combs, which is something I never thought I would be in that position.
I'll defend him.
Okay, well, look, I think a lot of people would. His lawyer was originally on Cuomo. Take a listen.
He's fighting. He's fighting. He's innocent, and he's going to be able to show it. They never once said that these women didn't consent to what happened. Not once.
Can they all have consented, or were they minors and therefore the consent doesn't apply?
Maybe it's not what someone here would do in the bedroom, but that doesn't mean that what he did was a crime.
Is that where this is headed, Berit?
Yeah, this is exactly their defense. Their defense is going to be this was consensual. It might be perverse to many members of the jury, but it's not illegal. That's going to be their entire defense. And what the government's really going to have to overcome in order to meet its burden is saying, no, this is not charged because it's kinky. This is not charged because we disagree with the conduct. It's charged because it's illegal. It's charged because it's commercial sex acts. It's traveling over state lines. It's doing this through fraud and coercion. That's why we're charging it, not because it's kinky.
Mark, at the same time,
you get the right jurors.
Yeah,
you got to get the right jurors. You got to get the ideal scenario is you get as close to 12 people, all loving freak-offs and lube, and you take one step back because obviously they're not going to reveal that, but they've got to be open-minded to dismiss some of the very liberal, outrageous, and what you would say is offensive conduct as, well, that's not a crime. Where's the crime? And when you narrow it down, you get people who get cross-examined vigorously, and they can't be believed. And there's where you get your reasonable doubt, if at all.
So, Berit, I guess this is where I keep coming back to, you know, he's accused in all these civil suits of sexual assault, of these really awful and horrible things. And people know about this case. Everybody's heard about it. And then they get in, and the prosecutor is saying, oh, well, person A was paid. They came over to across state lines to Diddy's house. They engaged in all of these acts. And, well, was person A coerced? No, that's not what was happening. It was consensual. At some point, do jurors go, gee, I don't think somebody should spend the rest of their life in jail for that, as perverse as it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have to show, and they've alleged some of these things in the indictment, they're going to have to show that it was more than just consensual sex that people might disagree with. They're going to have to show that this meets the threshold, not just of the law, but also that the facts are there, that they, are enough to convince 12 people, right? I do think, though, when they see things like the video that we've all now watched, of him, I mean, that's pretty shocking conduct. So I think even with something like that, like, we don't know their case, we don't know all their evidence. The one piece that we have seen is pretty shocking. I can imagine that swaying 12 people.
Yeah, the video is. Mark, Berit, thank you both. Appreciate it. I think we can all agree we wish it was on television, but it will not be. 80 years ago today, victory in Europe. Well, that was what we celebrated 80 years ago today. The British, they once ruled the land and the seas. Now its population says it won't fight in a war. The lack of patriotism has taken hold in Britain. What does it mean for here?
Surrender, the great news of the century. And in Canada, as across the world, both wild elation and sober thankfulness mark the first victory. The good news hits New York in early morning.
80 years ago today, victory in Europe. To be honest, I'd forgotten until I got up this morning, flipped on the television. The BBC went wall to wall with its coverage of the parade in London. Fitting, of course, that they would do that. To be fair, the King and Queen look a little, well, not like they used to. And then I started looking at the crowd there. Got me thinking, if America could win that war again. Of course, Donald Trump believes deeply in our military. Take a listen.
We have the greatest missiles in the world. We have the greatest submarines in the world. We have the greatest army tanks in the world. We have the greatest weapons in the world.
But when almost half of your country, as it does in Britain, does not think it's worth fighting for, well, you might have some problems. 48% in the UK say there is zero circumstances they would be willing to go to war. 34% of Americans, so a third of America, says they would be unwilling to fight. Retired four-star General Wesley Clark with us now, former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, the greatest title known to man. General, it's good to see you, sir. Could America win World War II now?
Of course we could. But remember, we stayed out of that war until we were attacked.
Yep.
We saw Britain being bombed. We saw France invaded and conquered. We saw a lot of other things that weren't reported, including all the roundup of the Jews. We did nothing, really, other than lend-lease some obsolete destroyers to Britain until we were bombed at Pearl Harbor. And then Hitler declared war on us.
Something else happened, though, and I think we're getting to the same point here, right? Which is that there is a lack of memory about the lessons of World War II. You could say Smoot-Hartley came in the beginning of the Depression, made the Depression worse, massive tariffs, and the only thing that got us out of the Depression was World War II. But that aside, back before Pearl Harbor, there were Americans signing up to go fight for the Brits. America's best institutions, the Ivy Leagues, were the recruiting grounds for the CIA and the military because of the sense of patriotism. And I think I'm hearing from you that you don't feel that exists in the same way.
No, I think it does. Honestly, if we were attacked again, when the forces build up against us, we'll have plenty of Americans who want to fight. Now, most people don't want to go fight and kill other people and risk being killed. Let's be honest about it. But when you challenge the country, when you threaten to kill our families and take away our freedom, people are, look what happened after 9/11. I mean, suddenly people were in the Ivy League who never had any connection to the military. Suddenly they all rushed.
That's fair. It's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I think 9/11, the worst of times bring out the best of Americans. Never bet against America. That said, I go back to the pandemic when effectively we were attacked in a way, and it divided us. People bang pots and pans, but you had big groups of people come out basically and say, hey, don't hold China responsible, when everyone really knew what was going on. We had Americans fighting with each other. We were attacked. You think it'd be different if it was a military attack?
You know, there's a lot of discussion about it, but I think it's pretty clear, at least to me, that COVID was came out of that laboratory in Wuhan. Now, whether it was deliberately planted in the United States doesn't matter, but it also got involved in politics because we had people who were saying, here's what we should do, and President Trump said, here's what I think we should do. And so it was a divide. And some people didn't want to listen to the prescription of Tony Fauci. And, you know, just to give one example, in February, apparently, President Xi told President Trump this thing's airborne, and yet we went crazy on washing our hands. And it really was coming at us through the air. It was only really through the hands in hospitals where you were touching people's blood and things like this. So there was a lot of confusion. We just, you know, but the other thing is, there's talk about the Center for Disease Control. We haven't invested in public health the way we should in America.
It's probably fair.
You know, 100 years ago, we eliminated yellow fever, malaria. We went after smallpox. We went after polio.
Yeah, now we can't get after obesity. General, I appreciate the optimism, sir. It's good to have you as always. I'm going to cut you off before the computer cuts both of us off. It's good to see you, sir. One thing for tomorrow when we come back. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister is in town tomorrow. You never know what'll happen. By this time, we could have a 51st state. See you then.